Welcome, everyone, to the panel on Power to the People, Human-Centric Data Governance in the Age of AI. I'd like to start by framing this conversation. How do we ensure that AI, which is seeping into every corner of our lives, is developed ethically and is trustworthy? So let's look at where we are today. Measured on a 4-stage maturity scale, a 2025 survey of 1,500 companies around the world found that 81% remain in the first 2 early stages of responsible AI. This is according to a September report from the World Economic Forum. While the number of companies with a stage 3 maturity increased from 14% in 2024 to 19% in 2025, less than 1% of companies are at stage 4. The limited maturity is prevalent across organizations, regions, and sectors. So let that sink in for a second. Only 1% of companies have fully implemented responsible AI, yet all of them are rushing to roll it out throughout their companies and to the public. Without robust governance, risks such as bias, misuse, and erosion of public trust grow sharply, says the report. Though the why of responsible AI is largely understood, the how remains elusive to most organizations. So beyond ensuring that AI that corporations are using does not harm society or misuse our data, how do we ensure that AI serves the public trust? This panel will look at concrete ways to do both. So it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists. Marianne Wilhemsen, State Secretary, Norwegian Ministry of Digitalisation and Public Governance. Marte Nordhaug, CEO, Digital Public Goods Alliance. Carolina Rossini, Professor of Public Interest Technology Program, University of Massachusetts Amherst and Boston University. And Dan Bogdanov, Chief Scientific Officer from Cybernetica. So let's dive in. This is for all of the panelists. A key takeaway from the AI Action Summit in Paris was the emergence of a new AI bloc comprised of Europe and most of the rest of the world, and built around open source. Some 58 of the countries attending the summit, which together represent over half of the global population, signed a statement committing to promoting AI accessibility to reduce digital divides and ensuring that AI is open, inclusive, transparent, ethical, safe, secure, and trustworthy, avoiding market concentration and making AI sustainable for people and planet. Sounds great. How do we get from statements to real-world implementation? So let me start with you, Dan. What is your view on the role of open source in ensuring that we get to trustworthy AI? It sounds good, but we all know that open source is also very messy. And so how do we move forward?
For me, there is the question of reliability. You have to be able to trust the system, and for that, there needs to be a consistent track record. With the AI models of today, I see that lacking a little bit. There's anecdotal evidence of people saying that the new GPT model is a little bit more detached than the previous one when it talks to me. So you're getting already the feeling that the previous model was different. What will the next one be? And so we are down to the question that there is currently yet no consistency of the style and tone of the services that we are going to be using. And if there is no reliability, there is human perception that this is all the time changing. So that's one of the reasons why it's going to be problematic. Now the question is, how can you control that if this particular system does your job well, that there will not be a regression in the next version? For that, you will need to control, at least partially, the infrastructure, you need to control the model, and you need to be able to select which ones run. Open source kind of gives you that. So in Cybernetica, we tried out some commercial tools, but we found that these get old very quickly. And then we got some hardware, started doing some open source models, and now we roll out the new service and destroy a few old ones every month or two. So currently, I think we're still in the exploration phase with regard to a lot of this. And I'm somewhat thinking that some of the governments may have to be flexible as well, in a similar way.
Okay, so let me then turn to you, Caroline. When we look at the race in AI and where the U.S. and China are, the rest of the world is asking, well, how in the world can we catch up with that? Open source would give a way that everyone doesn't have to start from scratch, that there's some basic layers that everyone could share, and then governments can build on top of that, companies can build on top of that. How do you see this evolving?
Sure. So I think actually we have to start with something that's very basic. What do we mean by open source in AI? And I will not use this whole panel to discuss concepts, right? I come from Creative Commons. I was doing Creative Commons back in the early 2000s. But I also have been an advocate from Meta to Telefonica to Electronic Frontier Foundation, right? So narrative is very important, especially when narrative becomes central to regulation, right? So we see the AI Act here in Europe creating lots of exceptions for open source. But what are we talking about? And that's extremely important because I think there is a lot of intent, right? Our previous panelists talked about intent. So there was a lot of positive intent when we say we want open source AI. It's important for inclusion, it's important for adoption, it's important for skill development. But open source AI is actually very different from open source software. Right? The software, you have the code, but in AI, you have various elements. I call like the AI stack, right? You have data, you have the model, you have the weights, you have the algorithms, and besides of that, you have the whole infrastructure, right? In the opening panels, many of the panelists brought the issue of GPUs, right? I'm from Brazil originally. I've been working a lot in the Caribbean. It's very interesting that a lot of countries in the global majority want to say we want our own AI, and that AI will be open source. Right? Brazil, India became countries that are leaders in open source software. Can they become leaders in open source AI? I'm not sure, right? Do we have access and talent for all those, for that openness in all the stacks, all the elements I mentioned? And we have the infrastructure power, right? So I think that when we think about open source and talent building, we have to be very clear about that. And I think that what Dan is doing and what the Tony Blair Institute is doing, if you were hearing the previous speech, is very different from what large platforms like Meta or OpenAI are doing. They are very different types of open source software. So we need to be aware of that, avoid open washing, which is something very interesting in our field, right, for many years. And one of the things, one of my think tanks is called the Data Sphere Initiative, and we've been doing a lot of sandboxes for AI that allows cross-border data. So can we have experimental, safe spaces that we can experiment and understand what's going on to then regulate through agile regulation? And so, yeah, let's see. I'm going to pause here. I could go for hours.
Okay. So, Marianne, digital sovereignty is a big buzzword these days. A lot of governments are concerned, about protecting their sovereignty. How do you see open source working into the conversation? What is being discussed along those fronts in Norway?
So I think that it wouldn't be possible for one country, let alone Norway, to kind of have the whole value chain and to be fully digitally sovereign. So we need to cooperate together there, and we can contribute with different things and different elements. For example, open source being one of them. I think for us, for example, when we talk about AI now, one of the things that we're doing is that we're building our own language models based on the Norwegian languages and the Sami languages with our context. We're training them on our, it's the National Library that's building it and training it on our data. Now recently also made an agreement with Norwegian media so we can train it on all Norwegian articles. And this will be like building blocks that both private and public sector can use and build on. And I think that will be very important for the trust that we need when we're implementing AI, especially in public sector.
Thanks. So, Liv, I see you've been taking furious notes, so.
So much to react to. Yeah, do you have a question or should I just jump in?
Just jump in.
No, I mean, I had also the fortune to hear the closing remarks of the previous speaker and the mention of radical transparency. And I lead the Digital Public Goods Alliance Secretariat, and we have taken a stance for what it means for AI systems to be digital public goods, where we actually require all of the components that were mentioned now to be open. That also means fully open training data. This is an extremely hard bar to meet. It's almost utopian, some would say, and some have said. But there's a reason why we have opted for that. And that is because we understand that not all AI systems will be digital public goods. But we do believe that it's very important to have some that actually help show the way. And also, we have open data in and of itself as a category of digital public goods. And one of our major concerns was that if we did not advance open training data when we were considering what it meant to be an AI system as a digital public good, we risked also undermining the idea of open data in and of itself. So from our perspective, we believe that the best way we can contribute to kind of help usher in this landscape is also by making sure that there's more high-quality open training data that can be input factors for public interest AI. And then, so that is kind of our way and paving out kind of this niche in a broader system of what that means. So I think that's one of the first points I'd like to make. But could I ask the audience a question?
Sure.
Because I had that in mind, and I just wanted to start by asking how many here kind of feel like imposters when they talk about AI, in the sense of how many here can actually build themselves? How many of you can build something, build an AI system? And I know this is a fairly technical audience, but I'm still expecting that we will see relatively few hands left raised. How many of you are affected by AI?
All of us, right?
All of us. And when you think about food, how many of you know how to make and cook every single dish or meal or thing that you put in your mouth? I would guess no one. But how many of you like to know what's in the food and in the dishes that you actually eat? I think most of us do. And I think that's the most important thing I want to leave us with, is that we do need to know what goes into these systems, because they are affecting all of us, and they're going to affect us more and more. So I just wanted to stress that.
I think it's a great point. And so, from there, I want to go to you, Carolina, and say, okay, given that we need to know what is going into our AI soup, let's look at the whole AI stack. What does it comprise, and what do we need to do to introduce trust and transparency at every level of that stack?
Sure. So one of the words actually that always comes to mind when I hear you speaking is the idea of agency, right? So the same way that some countries built strong consumer protection laws, some have not. But actually, if we even think about some elements, right? I always like to think about, it's funny because I'm a lawyer teaching engineers and data scientists, and that is actually my theory of change after passing through a lot of pieces in my career. I said, you know what, I need to go back all the way to the beginning of the value chain and really talk to those folks that are actually building the products, that are actually building the technology, right? When I was at Facebook a lot of times, it's been many years, so I don't have any days anymore, but I'm gonna be quiet, but quite careful. A lot of risk assessment would come for us in the policy team. I was in the lobby shop in Washington, D.C., 2 weeks before launch, right? The only thing I could say is don't launch in this country because there is an election going on, right? So the policy teams in a lot of companies, even if you have extremely smart, talented people that keep dedicating themselves to understand the technology, even if they have legal or policy backgrounds, right? They don't have that much impact. Policymakers change. Right? We can change laws, but the policymakers change with times and you lose the whole thing, right? Just yesterday I was moderating a remote panel back in my university with Alex McGleaver, who was both at the Obama and Biden, and he was co-author of the executive order for AI, right? And he said, everything went to the trash now, and that happens, right? So I said, I think the tactic here is really go back in that value chain, understand the value chain of technology and train, because at the moment you have things like the idea of agents, because engineers and data scientists, they're not bad people. They're just trained to solve problems quickly, right? They don't think about ethics. They don't think what equity means. They don't think what inclusion means, right? And product managers, they think about profit. You need to understand the incentives of each actor, right? So how can you translate to their language? To product managers, you say, it's not just about inclusion, it's about market share, right? For a long time, Chinese AI was much more inclusive than AI models coming from California. We all know why, right? This has been discussed over and over. So you have to translate the language, and it's very interesting because a lot of the future engineers and the data scientists, especially in the US and Brazil, we have a lot of data on that. They really want to find jobs nowadays with purpose, right? And purpose is about serving, is about public interest, even if they are in the private sector. So really thinking about what each of those values, equity, inclusion, diversity, security by design, privacy by design, and FYI, right? The IEEE has a lot of standards on these issues, including on ethical AI. It's like 130-page document. They should simplify somehow, make more user-friendly. But there are standards out there. So it's really how you translate that. So later on, that is, we think that becomes part of the infrastructure of the technology. The same way that Creative Commons, the open copyright license, right, became part of a lot of infrastructure in the internet, and nobody noticed anymore, but took years for that to happen, right? So I think thinking about the statics of really inserting values in the infrastructure so they become standards and we don't even think about it anymore is a very important way to go when you're building talent.
I think it's a great point because, as you say, regulation come and go, and it's impossible with this at the speed that technology is changing for regulation to keep up and be relevant. But if you have a global engineering organization like the IEEE that has actually already devised a roadmap on how engineers can actually embed ethics into the technology, we need to use it. So with that, Dan, I'm going to turn to you and I'm going to ask, what's the role of software here?
Oh, there's a lot of, there's a big role for software. I have to follow up to Norway. I had previous reasons to move to Norway, now there's one more. Anyway, for Estonia, the thing is that there's not going to be a national model based on the national library. We are sitting in it, but the AI trainers can't get access to it. And even if we put everything we have in here into the LLM then there is not enough Estonian language in the whole world to train an LLM. So if you were asking about soup or food, then the Estonian LLM soup is 50% English, 25% software code, and 25% Estonian language. And it's actually everything is a fine-tune of Llama from Meta. So that's the current SGPT. And Finn's, the Poro LLM, is exactly the same recipe. So again, I'm super proud of our Norwegian colleagues. I wish we could mimic some of it. But yeah, the transparency thing in Scandinavia isn't ubiquitous in the rest of the world. For software, being able to control your software is a thing that's often overlooked because also for AI, it's super easy. You already managed to get Microsoft into your house. You have the Office, SharePoint, all these beautiful things. And then Copilot sort of happens to you. And the rollout is not so perceptible even. You just flick a button somewhere, start paying some extra, and yeah, you got it. So the question is, it happens so quickly, which is not a bad thing. It's from a user experience standpoint, it's excellent design, and you get it easily, and it's wonderful stuff. However, what you don't have is you will lack controls over how this works. And if you want to suddenly then start controlling it, then you need an army of consultants and the engineers, some of whom are actually nice people. I'm a runaway scientist, so I sort of felt it for a moment. But the question is that for a country being able to understand the software, if it's open source, it's easier. If it's not open source, still good. But if you don't understand the pieces of which you build your government, then it's going to be problematic. For hardware, it's harder because it's hardware, yeah? Because there's a limited number of people you can buy your telco equipment from, and all your communications run through it. So that's a bit problematic, but you can still do software. So one of the things that Cybernetica has been doing over its 28 years is we're building systems where there is no single point of control whenever possible when it comes to e-government platforms or digital identity platforms or AI or data systems, decentralization, use of clever cryptography, even being able to avoid hardware roots of trust. So that's one thing. But this assumes that there is a sufficiently strong engineering base and a research base. And that's not present in every country.
Just to follow up there, Dan, I think it's worth noting that you've been working with Estonia government for years, but now you're actually working with other countries as well to help them use software to maintain a degree of sovereignty.
Yeah, that's the storyline. So there's a number of beautiful myths about Estonia, and some of them bring people here to the Tallinn Digital Summit every year. However, one of the things that's relatively true is that we don't have super databases, and some of our most popular digital identity platform isn't a super database either when it comes to private keys. So you just can't take it and walk, which is kind of nice. And that's pretty weird because there isn't really a country that has rolled out all of this elsewhere. So in that sense, yeah, the dream I have is sort of getting more countries to be technologically as digitally sovereign as possible, because we've had to do it, and so much in Estonia now relies on digital signatures with prime ministers and presidents signing stuff digitally. If it doesn't work one day anymore, if somebody else starts controlling this infrastructure, they control the country in a way. So it's a sort of a national security thing at this point already. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Liv, let me turn to you. How is the Digital Public Goods Alliance helping advance a more open, equitable way of building AI systems that serve the public interest?
Well, I think in a way Dan kind of said what we're doing. And I mean, Cybernetica is part of the implementation machinery, I would very much say around supporting countries around the world to reuse digital public goods, to adopt and adapt them to meet their contextual needs. Mm-hmm. And I touched upon in my previous answers a bit about our thinking about radical transparency when it comes to AI systems as DPGs. Mm-hmm. But again, I'm kind of I'm not going to skip the question, but I wanted to pick up on something Dan said, and also Marianne talking about sovereignty, because you said something that just resonated. I don't know if it gave me the creeps because I feel it so much myself, and that is, it sort of just happens to you. That's what AI is doing now. A lot of the AI developments we're seeing, they just kind of suddenly they appear. You do an update of your software, and there's a new functionality, and suddenly your training data is being shared for some purpose, or suddenly ChatGPT goes to being a less friendly version, or like, because the idea, like there were some downsides in the first version, right? But we absolutely have to properly start thinking about these capabilities as infrastructure. So to Carol's point, we need to they need to have a public interest mandate. And that's what we found out belatedly with social media, right? It's kind of like, oh, we'll just let some engineers run away and build the stuff without thinking about what they would do for us and to us. So in the sense of but to bring it back to the DPGA, we have information pollution as one of our strategic targets in addition to scaling digital public infrastructure. And in order to address information pollution, I actually think it's one of the most urgent kind of AI topics we have today, because the AI manipulation we're seeing of our public discourse right now on social media platforms, it is rapidly tearing us apart as societies. And it is very relevant for the AI future, because it is rapidly diminishing our ability as democratic societies to actually shape our AI future. Because the more polarized and fragmented we become as democracies, in countries like Norway, Estonia, and many other countries here now, we are not able to make decisions. We're not able to find consensus, and we have political fragmentation. And what happens in the meantime? Someone else makes those decisions. That's what happens. It's not a vacuum. So we actually need to really, really go in where there is like norm shaping, like where our norms are shaped the fastest, where things just happen to us and they change the way we think, the way we behave, the way we relate to one another, the way we govern our societies. So I think, to come to the point, that we really, really need to think about alternative social media technologies. And I believe that digital public goods will be a very important part of scaling that landscape. But we have to do it differently than what we've done so far. So we actually have to set the ground rules and think of them as infrastructure. So we have to set some capabilities in the infrastructure. And that I believe.
To one thing here, because I'm always thinking in the trade-offs model, right? And we have to remember that a lot of the movement around civil rights actually started back with the NSA scandal, the increase of privacy norms around the world, the increase of data localization around the world, right? Switzerland, the neutral country, is the one pushing a lot of this. All of us, right? All the countries are Brazil, all of the countries. But one of my fears is that we end up in a global society of silos that's actually less inclusive and allow for less dialogue. So I wanna make sure that when all our countries think about sovereign, and that again, that was a reaction to the platforms in the US. We all know that, right? And also to allow local innovation and things like that. So how can we allow for local innovation, for inclusion, for recognition of languages that are smaller languages, less like writing in right? Brazil has a lot of languages that are disappearing from our original populations, right? But doesn't take us to silos, right? And I think that the idea of agency and transparency is really important. I think open source helps because it does build community. But again, right, I don't want to go back to what we discussed in the beginning. I don't want to be repetitive. But it's really about agency, transparency, intent, like was discussed before. Sorry, I cut on your...
No problem. Yeah. Dan, you wanted to say something.
Risk management, there needs to be a better maturity of that, because again, I don't want Europe to lose out economically to the rest of the world.
Exactly.
That means we have to do stuff.
Yeah.
This means we have to have trade-offs.
Yeah.
So I run the...
And sell and actually do trade.
yeah, but there has to be trade for there to be trade-offs. I run the cybersecurity committee at the Estonian Academy of Sciences, and for the last 2 years we did risk analysis for voting technologies, paper, electronic, and so on, and mobile phone. And now from this fall we started also on digital sovereignty and AI and also that stuff, because the wish list of risks that we should analyze with our group, with not just a single expert, thank you to the previous speaker, is just so long. We collected it from institutions, governments, and so there's so many things they're worried about. Are we doing this correctly? Is this an actual risk, or is this just academics telling us that, oh, if you do it, there will be Armageddon? So I don't want to be in the latter camp. I don't go around scaring people. I'm telling them, right, we'll do a risk analysis. What are your assumptions? What are the current controls you have in place? Do you have money to put some few more controls in place? Alrighty, you do. So go for Copilot. It's going to be fine. Possibly, but don't take this as a product endorsement from me. I cannot give product endorsements. For you, it might not be fine. Check your priors.
Exactly.
So, Marianne, I want to get to you, and I want to throw something out that came up at this Meta breakfast here this morning. Somebody mentioned a recent poll that showed that, citizens, in Europe, when they rank what are the most important issues to them, technology comes out at the absolute bottom. And given that, AI has such a huge impact on our lives, this is a problem, because if people don't think it's important, then politicians are not going to think it's important. So, can you respond to that?
I wasn't at the breakfast, but I can certainly give my initial. But I can very much recognize that. For example, in the parliament in Norway, we see that questions about digitalization coming to our ministry are at the very bottom. And it kind of sends a signal that the politicians at the parliament aren't interested in technology and digitalization. But I think it's the reason behind that is because it's embedded in everything else. So when you discuss healthcare, education, when you discuss all of those things, you're also discussing technology. So that means that even though the questions aren't necessarily being rooted into the category of digitalization, for example, and in this case maybe technology, it's still very much a part of what people are concerned about, and I think, for example, when it comes to public sector now with the rush of AI, and I often say that there is not one race, and I certainly don't think that Norway can win the race if there is one race, but if among the various races, I think that the trustworthy, safe, ethical AI, that's a race where we can, in the Nordic countries, really can succeed and make it a competitive advantage for us. And I often say that we need to move quickly, but we cannot rush. And in Norway, we have a goal set in our digitalization strategy that within 2030, 100% of all governmental agencies should use AI. And of course, a lot of them are exploring at this point and using Copilot and such, but it's getting embedded in quite a fast scale. And we had recently a little scandal in Norway, and I also read they had it fairly recently in Australia as well, but where this report was produced, and it had on a school structure case, and it had a lot of fake or non-existing research that it linked to, and this very much affects trust, obviously, and I think because they had used Copilot and such, but I think that instead of us, it was so serious that it reached the national media, which I think was important because a lot of leaders around the country, especially in the public sector, I think they were we have to fix. Do we have the routines? Do we have the skill sets? Do our people know how and when to use the tools that we have in place right now? But it wasn't as serious that anything had come to harm yet. So in one way, maybe like a perfect scandal to shook the society in Norway. Because I very much agree with you on risks. We cannot succeed if we don't take risks. We need to take risks as well to be able to move forward. So we weren't pointing fingers at that municipality. Rather that we were saying we need to learn from this mistake.
Okay, great. Liv, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, so the competitive advantage point, and also to Carol's point about how we make sure that we don't going to lose track of cooperation also in this. So I think, first of all, interoperability is critical. So there's the thinking about what are the shared open standards, protocols we can build on. But also the competitive advantage in sharing high-quality open-source technologies and providing implementation services to those that are using those technologies. There is a commercial advantage to having good technology to offer to the world that is adoptable and adaptable. So I do think that there is a lot of potential in the reusing, and I see that Dan is skeptical, but it's a big part of the business model, though, for Estonia. But I think that also is a way of helping countries continue to collaborate, also in an increasingly geopolitically fragmented world.
Agree with that, and building on what she was saying, which is key, is the idea of training of policymakers and bringing technologies to the government. That's key, because it's true that sometimes the answer is to adopt Copilot. And by the way, Microsoft has Sarah Bird as the head of responsible AI, and she's doing incredible work, from red teaming to installing the IEEE standards. So they are doing that. And because if governments or clients are not satisfied, they lose money, right? So they need to respond to that pressure. But countries in parallel need to develop capacity internally, need to develop technologies, need to build a pipeline from universities to the government, to nonprofits, so again, we have agency as a country, right?
Okay, so we've got 1 minute and 14 seconds left. And so quickly, can each of you give a call to action? What's the one thing you want to see companies and governments do to move us closer to a trustworthy AI? Dan.
I want not companies or governments. Talk to your children so that they wouldn't have to talk to an AI, and they would actually go and meet boys and girls in the future, not form relationships with computers. That's important. That life continues.
I do have a 14-year-old, and it's a conversation that we have a lot, actually. But anyway, so I think my contribution could be interdisciplinary, right? Think about public interest technology as a way to build your pipeline of undergrads and grads, so we all arrive later on, right, with values and better technology and this larger holistic awareness of impact and all. So yeah, be interdisciplinary in your curricula.
Liv.
Continuing to collaborating and sharing and strengthen agency and implementation capabilities in governments, public sector, civil society, to make sure there's checks and balances.
Marianne, you've got the last word.
Transparency. Transparency when we use AI, what data we train it on, and also going forward when explanatory AI.
Okay, and apologies, we didn't get to the questions from the audience, but the panelists just had so much to say and share, so sorry for that, but hopefully we can continue the conversation out in the corridors, and let's have a nice round of applause for our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jen.